Hi, I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Welcome to this IPA Talk, our second episode for Season 2. Really happy to have Amanda Karhuse with me from NASSP, who's Director of Advocacy. So thanks for making the long journey from the East Coast here to the Midwest, Amanda. Really appreciate that.
No problem, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So now we were talking last night at dinner. We had a group of board members and things out, and you were kind enough to join us for that. You said you've been in this position like 11 years
11
now,
years,
right?
yeah, in May, actually.
Wow, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Good for you, good for you. So lots to talk about. Let's get right into it here. I know you're busy traveling across the country, talking with associations and school leaders and things about things that are going on. ESSA obviously is right at the top of people's lists. So just curious from your perspective as you're watching the national landscape, what are you seeing with that? What's happening with people's plans? How's the DOE reacting to those plans? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. NASSP was obviously very excited when ESSA passed, and there were a couple of provisions that were of real interest to us and our members. We were really excited to see provisions in there related to stakeholder engagement, requiring that principals and other educators actually be consulted in the development of their state plans. So that's something we've been watching really closely. We have a state lobbyist network, and also our network of state coordinators have regular conversations with them just to hear about what's been happening with their states. Do the principals feel like they've been part of the process? Are they being heard by their state Department of Ed in the development of those plans? On that, it's been a little bit mixed. Yeah. And we also had some concerns with the repeal of a lot of the regulations that the Obama administration had put out on ESSA. And part of that was the template that the states actually have to fill out to submit their plans to the Department of Ed. And it kind of glanced over that section, but it wasn't nearly as substantive as it had been before. So we've been working closely with CCSSO, National PTA, and some other organizations just to try and provide some more guidance to the states that haven't submitted their plans yet, and to look at the implementation phase, because it's not just supposed to be submitting the plan to the department, but it's actually the implementation and whether groups are still being part of the process. As far as the plans that have been submitted, Illinois is one of 16 states.
That's right.
And
you spoke of the listening tours and the engagement.
Right.
We had over 80 listening tour visits across the state. So we were joking with the state board that we needed to see T-shirts, like a concert tour. So sorry, but yeah, so we had a lot of engagement happening.
That's really good to hear. We're not hearing the same thing in other states. I was in Nevada last month, and I think 2 people in a room of a few hundred principals and superintendents even knew their plan had been out for public comment. So it's a little bit unfortunate there. But the plans that have been submitted are now under review. The Department of Education has 100 days to provide feedback. And it's been interesting because when this administration repealed the regulations, I think NASSP and a lot of national education organizations, the civil rights community and others were really concerned that that meant Secretary DeVos and her team were just going to rubber stamp the plans and not really provide any feedback and make sure that they're following the law. So I think people have been surprised by some of the comments that have come back for Delaware, I think Connecticut, and some others, where they really are sort of scrutinizing the plan and are making some comments that are not really aligned with the actual statute. And that's been shocking to some people. There's actually a hearing going on this morning in the House Education Workforce Committee. Nobody from the Department of Education is actually testifying, but they are hearing from some superintendents and some states just about their concern that there not be federal overreach in these plans. I think from our point of view, we want some balance. It probably would be helpful if the department did put out some new regulations or some guidance about why they're approving certain things and not others.
Well, and Senator Alexander's been pretty clear that he wants things to follow the letter of the law, correct?
Yes. He even made a comment that Jason Botel, who's currently the acting assistant secretary, had obviously not read the law very carefully.
I think I saw the tweet about that, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that, so that's been interesting and sort of surprising because we really were not expecting that from this administration. And so we'll see. I know Illinois has not gotten feedback yet on your plan, and so it'll be interesting to see kind of moving forward on those other states. And then, everybody else has to submit their plans in September. So it's going to be a busy time at the Department of Ed in the fall reviewing all those plans.
Well, I would say we're really not waiting, in Illinois. We are still trying to motor ahead and make sure that we, stay true to what the plan says, anticipating feedback, but still wanting to make some things happen. In particular, and I don't know how other states are wrestling with this, is, as we look at indicators for accountability, we're really challenged by what to do with early childhood because there's just not great, valid, reliable sources of data for that. And as we try to look at how to manage student growth and all of that to incorporate that in, that's just a challenge point for us that I think that we're finding. We're seeing that looking at attendance is a pretty easy one.
Yeah.
After looking at that, especially in those lower grades, it's pretty tough.
And I think a lot of states are challenged with that sort of fifth indicator they're calling like the school quality and student success measure. I think a lot of them are focused on chronic absenteeism because it is the easiest data point for states to collect. And one point, a lot of think tanks have been doing some reviews. I personally have not had time to review all 17 state plans, although I did look at Illinois', was that they said there's more of an emphasis on college readiness than career readiness, but it was a shout out to Illinois that you all do have a couple of indicators of career readiness that a lot of states could maybe learn from. Well, and just not to interrupt you, but I would just tell you what's helped with that is we had a high school district in Arlington Heights, District 214, that really did some strong work with that. Dave Schuler, who's the superintendent there, he's former president for AASA. And so I think as a result of their efforts in promoting that, that's put us in a pretty strong position to make sure we at least inject some balance between the college and career readiness. Yeah, and NASSP was really interested in that work, and we've had some meetings with them as well to see how we can get those, that we look more comprehensively about what's happening at a school, that we're not just looking at test scores. I think one good thing that's across all 17 plans is that they are including a student growth measure. That was not required by the statute. It was just, an allowance for states, and we had been pushing for it to be mandatory, but states are, I think just with all the growth models that came out of No Child Left Behind, I think a lot of states are headed in that direction. You bet, absolutely, and we've done that here as well. So let's change from ESSA. I know we could talk a long time about that because there's a lot to discuss, but obviously, to make these things happen, we've got to have dollars in order to do that, and been a lot of concerns when we saw the initial draft here of the administration's budget blueprint, wiping out a lot of title dollars, particularly for us, Title IIA money that we use for professional development. We've also expressed some concern to our congressional delegation about the loss of Medicaid dollars and how that money is used to support special ed students and other kids in need. So, where are we sitting right now? What do you think? Yeah, these are both really hot topics in D.C. So the president did release his full budget proposal in May. He put out what they referred to as a skinny budget in February. So we kind of knew some bad stuff was coming down the line, but we didn't know how bad it was going to be for education until the full proposal came out. It's going to cut $9 billion from FY 2017. That's a 13% decrease from where funding was in the continuing resolution for this year. And it's attacking pretty much everything under the sun. Now, this administration is really interested in choice proposals. So there was a $1 billion increase for Title I, but with the caveat that it be used to look at some portability for students to be able to attend the school of his or her choice, whether that be a public school or private school. It didn't differentiate there. I think IDEA would be actually cut by $1 million in the president's budget. Strangely enough, both the president and Secretary DeVos have talked a lot about career and technical education and workforce development, but there was a cut to the Perkins program in the budget proposal. And then kind of what's been the biggest issue for NASSP and NAESP and others is the complete elimination of Title II, Part A, which is the funding for teacher and principal quality. So that has been concerning, and we've been really leading the charge on advocacy in that area. I can go into specifics if you want me to. Where they are in the process right now is that actually the House Labor, Health and Human Services Education Subcommittee marked up their bill last week. It's not as bad of cuts to education as the president's budget. It's only a $2.4 billion decrease. But again, they are proposing to completely eliminate Title II funding. That was sort of surprising to us. We know that the full committee is going to mark up on Thursday of this week, and have heard that Rep. David Price from North Carolina will be offering an amendment to restore the Title II funding and also funding for the school leader recruitment and support programs. So we're going to be following that closely. Obviously, working on the Senate side, we have some champions over there. We're trying to identify some Republican champions on Title II to try and restore those cuts. And then it's really unclear what will happen. We spend so much time focusing on these appropriations bills, but it's been more than a decade since Congress has actually passed all 12 appropriations bills by the end of September. And so it seems likely we're going to end up with some sort of continuing resolution, probably an omnibus is likely. So we don't have to focus too much on what one subcommittee did, but certainly it's going to...
But if we don't pay attention and react,
exactly.
Right, they
and,
won't think
you
that we care
know,
about that.
obviously we've been big proponents of how Title II could be used. And actually during ESSA, we really wanted Congress to limit the funding a little bit more and be more clear and specific on how states and districts should be spending that funding to support teachers and principals. We supported a cap on class size reduction that was in the House bill. And now, you know, the argument is that, the program's been ineffective, and there's not much research to show what it's been doing to make schools more successful, and I think that's a real shame. So we're trying to shift the conversation to focus on the language in ESSA that does require that the funding be used for evidence-based activities, and to look more at state plans and how they're proposing to use that funding in the future, and that's kind of been where we've been going with that.
So when you talk about, you know, your advocacy efforts, Amanda, can you just speak briefly, you know, what does NASSP do? We know what we do here in Illinois.
Sure.
You know, we have a pretty strong Principal for a Day program as a result of Allison Maley's work, our government relations director. We've had over 80 visits this last year in schools, which was terrific, and do some other, you know, campaigning via email or phone calls and things. But you know, what can we be doing to support your work at NASSP?
There's lots of things you could be doing. And actually, I will give a shout out to Illinois that anytime we send an action alert, your state is one of the most responsive with the number of people who are paying attention. You also have, we have state coordinators, one in each state, who are kind of our key state advocates. Here in Illinois, it's Kevin Shelton. Right. He does a great job representing you all. We are trying to really build our network of advocates. We call it our Federal Grassroots Network. As part of our strategic plan, I would like to have a very active grassroots network member in every single congressional district. So here in Illinois, you would need, I think, 18. Is that right? Your congressional delegation is 18 members. So, you know, in Montana, we're covered. We have our one state coordinator. California, we have a ton of work to do because we need to have 50 grassroots network members. But these are people who we really hope will, you know, go meet with their members in DC, back home in their state and district offices, and we'll really try and establish a relationship with that member of Congress and with the staff that works on education issues. We also try, and anytime we have NASSP members in Washington, we try and take them up on Capitol Hill. So our board went up in March. When the state principals of the year are in town in September, we have a Hill Day with them. And then we have our annual advocacy conference every year, which is meant for our state coordinators, also other state leaders, but we have opened that up to our Federal Grassroots Network. So hoping that, you know, as this conference grows, we can get more people coming to DC. We also celebrate National Principals Month in October.
You bet.
So this will be the 10th year that we're celebrating. It's actually my idea that we start having a month and a way to recognize and honor principals, but it's also just to make people better understand the role of the principal and what you all do. So we had done shadowing visits for a number of years with the Obama administration, where officials there at the Department of Education would shadow principals in the DC area. We tried to get that to grow, where they would have folks in their regional offices go out and spend a day with a principal. And now we're trying to encourage principals to invite, their congressional delegation during the Columbus Day recess. Would love to build on what Allison is doing here in Illinois and have more state legislators shadowing principals, also even school board members.
Sure.
So many of them do not have an education background and don't even know what a principal really does in the school. So we'll be putting out the call to get more of that happening during the month of October. But really, I think principals across the country should be inviting people into their schools, because that's really going to make an impact.
Agreed. So, Amanda, we're going to have to probably leave it right here, because there's just so much stuff we could talk about.
We didn't even cover Medicaid.
I know. I know. Call your congressperson to get that, make sure that that's protected as well. But Amanda Karhuse, Director of Advocacy for NASSP, thanks for joining me. I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of IPA. If there's anything the association can do for you anytime, please give us a call, and be sure to check us out on the web at ilprincipals.org. Take care.